I would have never comfortably called this a year ago, although I said it definitely looked a certain way, because things can come out. There could be new video footage that could show like, hey, well, this happened or this happened, that makes things look different. I think we've seen all the progress of the trial now. There hasn't been any new footage. It seems to be exactly as it appeared to be a year ago. It was pretty obviously self-defense. I don't think anybody is seriously contending with that anymore. And then in terms of the whole crying or fake crying thing, I'm really glad that he cried on the when he was giving testimony, because I can see how many like fake fuck lefties that pretend to care about or understand anything about like panic attacks or trauma or any of that stuff have come out of the woodwork. You've got people that will like have breakdowns and cry because people said mean stuff to them on Twitter, but somehow can't believe that a 17-year-old is having a breakdown after killing 2 people. That is actually hilariously, phenomenally stupid to me. But yeah, I feel
he's got like Twitter PTSD or something.
I feel so crazy about this case because this is like one of the most obvious cases of all time. So was the Jacob Blake one, which by the way is what led to the Kenosha riots, where that guy got shot by the cops in an entirely reasonable manner, and he should have been. It was absolutely 100% reasonable. And the misinformation surrounding that shooting is what led then to 2 more people dying and 1 other person being shot by Kyle Rittenhouse 2 days later. And we're repeating it again. You guys are just going to run through the same hamster loop of lying about the facts of the matter and then trying to come to absurd conclusions that are not reality based, and then getting mad at people when they get upset because people are saying, oh, the left wing media or mainstream media is lying about shit. Why do you keep doing this? Learn the facts. If you want to attack anybody's statement, I'll defend any statement I've made. I'm just saying that it's really upsetting that about this particular case, where there is an unprecedented amount of video footage available, everybody has proven to the world that the amount of information available doesn't matter because people will pick and choose and watch what they want. When the facts of the case can be laid out so cleanly with this that it was pretty obviously self-defense. But Rosenbaum grabbed Kyle's fucking rifle before Kyle shot. There wasn't another second that he could wait on it. Okay, there wasn't more time that he could have waited to shoot at him, right?
He literally admitted in the trial that Rosenbaum hadn't touched him.
His rifle. He touched his rifle. He had his hand on
Also, are we just going to ignore the fact that Joseph was literally there and he lied about being an EMT? He lied about being actively in nursing school. Are we just going to lie about it? He was literally walking.
None of that matters.
He was literally walking.
None of that is relevant to self-defense. Literally, none of those facts would deprive him of his right to self-defense.
Right, and
obviously people are going to take up their legal right to bear arms and defend their communities. Like that's what you should expect. That's the next step. People aren't just going to lay down and watch their entire cities burn for no reason.
There were cops there.
No, hold on. Wait. To be clear, okay, we just had a conversation, okay, about how in a pre-planned event, okay, cops couldn't even control people from dying in a fucking mosh pit at a concert. Why do we think that police officers are going to be able to stop an entire like protest going on in a city? This is Kenosha. What is this population, like 100,000 or less? Like this is a small town. Unless you literally calling in the National Guard in advance, you're never going to have the personnel required to stop these types of protests.
They could stop making a rod for their own back by being shit.
Yeah, but the problem is
circling the wagons.
But the problem is half the reasons why you think their shit are fucking fabricated by people that don't read the fucking facts of the case. So going on the Kenosha thing,
maybe that's true, but they still do murders. Murders still fucking take place.
We have a country
rarely held accountable.
Okay, if I show you one murder every single day unjustified,
specifically went there as a counter protester to a movement.
So of course, so the problem is that on the national level narrative, okay, that's what we see. We see a protest. And BLM is there, and they're there to protest the righteousness of bringing justice to the American people.
Sure,
okay? That's not the point of view that every individual citizen across the United States has. If your community has already been fucking lit on fire for 2 nights prior in response to the Jacob Blake stuff, which it had been, right? And if you have CNN standing outside with cameras saying mostly peaceful protest with a fucking car dealership on fire in the background, your view isn't going to be, wow, there are friendly BLM protesters coming to this city just to march up and down the street and get their message across. You're probably thinking more like, wow, there's going to be crazy people coming to my city tomorrow. They might blow shit up, so I'm going to show up with a force of arms to defend my shit. That's if that's the case.
But I'm saying, do you see why it is that he was painted as a white supremacist?
By dipshits? Yeah, absolutely, of course.
I think it's that if you go there as a counter protester to a BLM protest, then of course you're going to be painted.
Let's say that there were okay, my last thing, Rob, and then you can go. I'll shut the fuck up. Okay, let's say there are feminist protests all across the United States. It's for women. They love equal rights. Blah blah blah. Let's say that last night in your town there was a huge feminist protest and they burned half the fucking city down, and they're coming back the next night. If you show up, are you automatically anti-feminism now? This is the same game that Republicans. No, let me finish. Fuck you. This is the same game that Republicans play when they try to say like, oh, well, we're patriotic, and then when you attack them, they're like, oh, you hate the country. Oh, you hate the country. That's what you're doing right now. I don't give a fuck if it was a BLM protest, if it was a KKK protest, if it was a neo-Nazi protest, it was a goddamn fucking second coming of Jesus Christ protest. The fact of the matter was a group of people showed up, they burned shit down for the prior 2 nights, and they were coming back a third night. Somebody's gonna show up to defend them. It doesn't matter what the fuck the label is, and just because you show up to defend your city from an opposite fucking crew that's coming in and burning shit down doesn't make you anti whatever their label happens to fucking be that night. That's all I got.
I'm not saying it makes you anti.
But like the idea that the institution of the police is fine and there is no reform necessary, blah, 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 that's ridiculous. However, the left continuously finding these stories that they dramatically misrepresent, or this overall narrative that like if you're a black person in the United States, cops are just indiscriminately driving around like mowing you down in the street. That's absurd. And I think that that type of environment puts everybody in an unhealthy world where we're protesting issues that aren't actually existing, where we're calling for changes that don't actually help,
we're
like all the defund
issues
or whatever.
that aren't actually existing.
Is there like a 10-second echo in here? Is that,
well, Destiny, can you
like Jacob Blake aren't like victims of the system, and cops aren't always doing these horrible things, right? We like totally lose sight of like any realistic conversation.
He is a victim of the system. He's literally paralyzed.
After he tried to drive off with his ex-girlfriend who he'd fucking raped, drive off with her rental car and her fucking kids. He got shot. Yes,
kids were in the car.
Right, and listen, real quick, what Destiny,
can you answer my question as well? If that picture at the bar with the OK sign came out from before, would you change your mind, Destiny?
Maybe, but maybe not.
Okay,
that's
go
not
ahead.
enough.
You can answer Shark's question.
Here's my issue, okay? So the reason why we identify any problem ever is so that we can have a solution. That's the whole point of analyzing problems. We don't just look at things and say this is bad because it's bad and then we leave it. We try to, so if you're a doctor, you try to diagnose a disease, and the reason why we diagnose a disease is to find therapeutic treatments for it. So if I look at a whole bunch of militiamen showing up to a city, and my analysis is, I think these guys are all racist because they're here opposing BLM. Well, how do we fix that problem, right? Well, we're gonna have to talk about like, how do we make people less racist? How do we like get people to have better views of BLM? Like these are the situations, these are the problems that we're gonna be trying to solve, okay? But if we back up and we go, okay, well, hold on. We say that there's a bunch of militia-like people showing up to a town, and the reason why they're doing it is probably because like their city has been burned down over and over again, or there's a lot of rioting going on, and that's probably why they're there. Our solution to that problem is going to look a lot different, right? It's more likely the latter than the former reason, that they're probably there to protect their communities rather than they're there because they hate black people. So my solutions, I believe, are going to be more realistic when it comes to trying to get rid of this type of violence or prevent this type of violence in the future. If you're now
You're good. Come on in. Over here. Quick. Over here. Yeah. Come through. Yeah. There you go.
You're saying that Israel needs to allow Hamas to stay there, who's been breaking international law of our conflict for 20 years?
As opposed to Hamas allowing the Israeli government to stay there when they're breaking international law for even longer than that.
It's not peace. Nobody wants peace. People want justice.
Oops, it's just war. Gaza's unlivable anymore. Too bad it can't support Palestinian life. People are starving. It's just all an accident.
It's crazy that the numbers are so poor for a country that could kill so many more people. They're doing things that no other country's done. And there's a reason, by the way, which you will never recognize, why all of the surrounding Arab states have abandoned the Palestinians too, because their history has been one of violence, that first they've been encouraged by the surrounding nations and used by them, and then now they've been abandoned once the other nations have used them up.
That's a racist anti-Palestinian theory.
Racist? People will constantly say, you just said it here, well, what's the fair thing? They only want a sliver of this land, 1/5 of the territory. Yeah, they tried like 3, 4, 5 different wars to get more, and they lost. You can't continue to go back to the first try over and over and over again and demand the deal that was on the table before. You walked away from the partition plan in 47. You can't go to war 5 times and then keep going back to another set of borders. They're always one generation behind when it comes to accepting some type of actual peace deal. So as long as Palestinians have people like Omar internationally that will support them in an unlimited delusion to fight forever, Palestinians will never try to accept peace. And they shouldn't. They really should. There's no reason to.
When it comes to international support for Palestinians, there's one side that has had the international support of the world's great superpower, and the political and military support as well, Israel.
What about the Soviet Union supporting the Arab states?
The Soviet Union has had a very complicated relationship.
To be clear, the Soviet Union supported the Arab states before the United States. The United States didn't truly start supporting Israel until about 66, 67.
The Soviet Union also hasn't been here since 1991.
That's true, but the conflict also didn't start after the 91, after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But
the point is that Israel has...
Hamas engages in behavior that has been documented by the UN, by Amnesty International, by other NGOs, that is supposed to induce the death of civilians. I don't know why nobody seems to ever care about this. Hamas in the Gaza Strip exclusively fights in civilian clothes. Do you acknowledge that?
I was not familiar with that.
You don't care. Hamas will fight from hospitals. Do you acknowledge that?
They don't fight from hospitals.
What happened with the most recent raid on Al-Shifa?
Okay, so You've actually gone. No. I'm going to address this
because you're not. But so let me just get my thing.
Well, I mean, he said he doesn't think that they.
No, he's
fight
not.
for
You want to
Moscow.
understand? But I just want to go. I just want to just for people listening, I guess.
Yeah.
One of the frustrating things about asymmetrical warfare is that as law of armed conflict has evolved past the 90s, the collapse of the Soviet Union, states are having to do more and more fighting against non-state actors, which has posed a huge challenge to the ICJ and the ICC in terms of how you analyze this conflict. And the reason why it's such a challenge is because international law only works if it allows countries to effectively operate so that countries will want to follow it. So international law tries to balance, for law of armed conflict, two very, very delicate things. One is the protection of hors de combat peoples, people that shouldn't be killed ever. And then the other is a state's ability to conduct warfare. Because if you deprive either of these, if you don't protect civilians, everybody dies. And if you deprive a state of the ability to defend itself, nobody follows law of armed conflict. The issue with Hamas as an asymmetrical opponent is every single behavior that they engage in is meant to induce maximum civilian casualty. That means that they exclusively fight in civilian uniforms. It means that they operate out of civilian, supposed to be special protected areas like hospitals. The Al-Shifa raid recently is a good example of that. They booby trap corpses. They booby trap houses. This happened a lot of Protective Edge in 2014. Amnesty International reports show that. There was footage taken out of Al-Shifa Hospital in 2008. Amnesty International did a report on that there was an interrogation center in there. And we saw captured CCTV footage that showed hostages being brought into Al-Shifa Hospital. That Hamas will store munitions and they will fight even from zones that are supposed to be declared safe. And they store ammunitions in places like mosques or homes. All of these behaviors are designed from the Hamas perspective to induce the maximum amount of civilian casualties. And then when it happens, nobody has anything to say with Hamas and everybody has something to say with Israel. Why hasn't Hamas, by the way, these are also considered failures to uphold your duty under international law. Why hasn't Hamas tried to protect the civilian population? All those tunnels they built, they couldn't build one bomb shelter. Why hasn't Hamas tried to set up a humanitarian area? Why is it exclusively on Israel and the international community and Hamas can't do anything?
I'm sure it's very funny denying children the ability to eat chocolates and toys because they are Palestinian and not Israeli. That's just so incredibly trivial.
Yes.
Incredibly trivial.
The emotional appeals.
And potato chips.
It's working. We're two
yes,
more virtue signals away from a free Palestinian people. Keep going. Yes.
It's you trivializing. If it was the other way around.
I think that there are really good criticisms that can be made of Israel. I think that there are really good criticisms you can make of their past policy. And I think that the story of the Palestinian is an incredibly empathetic one. I think that there are reasons why you could support violence in 47, violence in 48, wars in 67. I think you can support all of these things from a really empathetic, understanding place. But the issue is that both sides are so invested in telling their story and making money and making videos and making whatever off of their particular side of things that you never will ever have that conversation. So, for instance, this is why identifying root causes is so important. When we talk about the blockade exists because during the Second Intifada, there was a lot of weaponry that came in to Gaza from the Mediterranean and from Egypt. This is a problem that Egypt recognizes, a problem that Israel recognized. That's why the blockade existed, especially after the Palestinian Authority was not able to bring Hamas under control, and Hamas gained control of that region. Israel said, well, fuck this. We're going to...
On point. I don't want to interrupt you. Just there's one thing.
That's fine. But one of the conditions of eliminating Hamas has to be the lifting of the blockade. Because with Hamas gone, your justification for the blockade is completely and totally non-existent. In my world. In your world, the blockade never leaves because the only reason it's there is to punish Palestinian citizens. So if you're constantly screaming at a government, hey, you need to take this blockade away because you just hate Palestinians, well, why would they ever remove it? There's absolutely no desire to. There's no reason to. Why would they? But if the argument is, well, we said that the blockade existed because weapons were going into a hostile administration. Well, now that hostile administration is gone and we allowed you to remove it at great cost, both to infrastructure and civilian life. Well, now we can say, hey, they're gone. You have to lift the blockade now. There's no justification for it. So if we have a real analysis of what's going on, we can levy legitimate criticisms. We can look for legitimate solutions. But if the arguments are delusional, that Israel is here indiscriminately murdering tons of people because they're evil or because they hate Jews or they hate Palestinians or hate Arabs or whatever, or they're racist or Islamophobic, there's no solution to be had because in your world, the hatred runs so deep, it's intractable.
Yeah. Crystal's lipstick just fell over. That's all it was. Nobody panic.
So it's funny. Some bits of that narrative actually were kind of like close to reality, but just let me fix it. And they replaced the occupation with the siege. That's what they did. And
the blockade started in like 2005.
Yes. So they withdrew.
It's been occupied since 48.
It remains Gaza has been occupied since 1967.
Gaza's been occupied since 1948.
What are you talking about? Israel took over Gaza in 1967.
Who took over in 1948?
The Egyptians did.
Yes. So it was occupied by the Egyptians.
Okay. See, this is the.
I know you don't like to talk about that because it's not convenient, but that's true. It wasn't a Palestinian state prior to 67.
Who cares? The point is.
Who cares? The Palestinians were. They had a fake government for 1 year that was recalled to Cairo and immediately disbanded. And it became a training ground for Fedayeen. What do you mean?
Let me then call.
They're trying to ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip. They want to kick Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip. Jews don't care about the Gaza Strip. They want to kick people out of Judea and Samaria. That's what Jews really care about. It's that encroachment into the West Bank. And we're not even talking about that anymore because now everybody thinks that apparently they want to put settlements back in the Gaza Strip, which historically Israel's never even cared about. So, yeah, I mean, Hamas has to go. I would hope that the blockade and the conditions are lessened there, but there has to be huge pressure on Israel and the Palestinians. There has to be huge pressure on both sides to reach some peaceful long-term agreement, because until that happens, it's just going to happen over and over and over again, so nobody's surprised.
The idea that like taking West Bank is going to somehow stop Arab aggression is completely incorrect.
Well, that was the whole point. The point was because it's a huge buffer then. There are a ton of times if you read Israeli historians, they use this phrase, and they used it a lot in the 40s and 50s, the rib cage of Tel Aviv. The idea that there were scant a few kilometers between the shores of the Mediterranean and where the West Bank territory was an incredibly frightful thing for them, right? You can shell the Tel Aviv literally from the West Bank. So after 67, this war happens, you get invaders from this area who continue to try to eliminate you as a country. Yeah, I think the argument for taking this territory and having it as like a buffer.
A quick zoom in. One thing I found very interesting, you talked about the Israeli army ratios for who they allowed to kill on what basis. What ratio would you be comfortable with?
It's not that I have a particular ratio in mind.
If it was 1 to 5, would that be okay?
Well, to be clear, you should talk about where those numbers are coming from. There was a really explosive report that came out maybe...
Ooh, I don't like that she bailed him out. That was a good question from Constantine. Like, okay, well, this ratio is unacceptable. What ratio would be acceptable?
Let's get into that in a second. I just want to finish this one point.
I don't have an answer for you, but what I know is you should not be the worst since the 1980s. Like if you.
So the fact that he doesn't have an answer here is a little bit of a red flag. I wouldn't expect him to have an exact answer, but we went over this before when it came to like policing in the United States. There's a good Scott Alexander article on this, that people will have an outrage, but they can't moderate it based on information. It's just a vibe. So if I tell you, for instance, okay, well, last year, 1,000 unarmed black men were killed by 100,000 police in the United States. How would that make you feel? Okay, well, that's horrible. It sounds bad. What did I say? 100,000 killing 1,000. Well, what if I say there's not actually 100,000 police in the United States? There's 1 million police, right? And the number of encounters is actually 10 times higher than you thought. Does that make you feel 1/10 as bad? Okay, well, I thought we only had 100,000 police, and these 100,000 police had managed to kill 1,000 black people. I thought 1 out of 100 police officers executed a black man. Well, now I find out the number is only 1 out of 1,000 instead of 1 out of 100. Does that meaningfully change the way you feel? For most people, it doesn't. They have no concept of whatever. What if I cut the number of innocent black people killed by 90%? What if I say instead of 1,000 black people killed, it was 100 black people killed, right? Or 10, right? Even when you change the numbers significantly by 90% or increase them by 900%, by 1,000%, it doesn't actually moderate or impact the way people feel about a particular thing at all, which is problematic. It shows that you're not engaging a critical part of your brain, but rather you're going by like, you're too narratively driven, and you're not, your feelings aren't reflecting any kind of like facts on the ground. They're reflecting like a narrative that's a little bit detached from reality, more detached than it should be.
You're probably not a justice.
So I'm sorry, to bring this back to this, I don't think that the guy should be required to say, hey, I think that the only acceptable ratio should be 2.78 civilian deaths for every 1 militant. Like, I don't think he should be required to do that, but he should be able to say something like, well, I don't know, like at least it's got to be under like 3 or 4. Like, you know, past that is crazy. He should have some kind of ratio in mind if he thinks that this one is bad. Otherwise, if you think this one's bad, but you don't even know what good would be, I mean, what is bad if it's just not good? Like, is any civilian death too much?
Not be the worst since the 1980s. Like, if you are, you're probably not a just war. So,
I guess what
like that argument doesn't make any sense, right? It just doesn't.
Go to your room.
sake or bigness sake. So people talk about taxes sometimes as like a punishment, like tax the rich. I think taxing the rich is fine insofar as it funds the programs that we want to fund. But Democrats have a really big problem demonizing success or wealth, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing to be wealthy, to be a billionaire or whatever, as long as we're funding what we need to fund.
Ben, what do you think it means to be a conservative? What's the philosophy that underlies your political view?
So first of all, I'm glad that Destiny, you're already coming out as a Republican. That's exciting. I mean, we hold a lot in common in terms of, the basic idea that for the various charges, and we can discuss each case if you want.
Sure.
As far as inappropriate, sure, I think tons of inappropriate stuff. I mean, inappropriate seems.
The reason why I don't like the word inappropriate, though, is because then conservatives are very quick to say, well, sure, he was inappropriate, but everybody was inappropriate.
I mean, I'll concede that he's more inappropriate than others. I just don't see
the most inappropriate.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean,
that's important to me, though. Does it not bother you that, I think Trump probably thought that if he had people that were, at least in his party and kind of camp, that they'll basically do whatever needs to be done to give him what he wants, and with no respect for process. But now that he sees that, well, it's not enough to just have allies. I need people that are fiercely allegiant to me. Would we not be worried that a guy that tried to essentially steal the election for real wouldn't try to pick people that would be more amenable to his plans in the next administration?
I believe in the checks and balances of American government. I believe they worked on January 6th. So if you're asking me, do I think that Trump has bad intent or could have bad intent with that sort of stuff? Sure. Do I believe that the guardrails held and will continue to hold? Also, sure.
So if somebody was running and they blatantly said, I don't want to use the fascist word, but if they said, I want to be an authoritarian, I'm going to abolish all elections, you would say, sure, he's saying that, but I don't think he can actually do it. So it's okay if he runs for president.
Because there's an intent element to this crime. Does Donald Trump? Do you think that today Donald Trump knows that he lost the election?
Absolutely.
So I don't actually. I think.
But so I'm glad that you have the attorney background. When we are assessing mens rea, when we're looking at certain criminal statutes where intent is required, it's a reasonable person standard, right? He trusted Barr and the DOJ. He asked Pence, his vice president, to look into it. He asked his chief of staff. He asked his legal counsel. He has so many people that ostensibly he trusts them if he's asking them to look into it. And when all of them looked into it and reported back to him, no, we found nothing. Unless we're going to literally make the concession that Trump might actually be a delusional psycho man, at that point, should he not have realized, okay, maybe there's
nothing. I think he should have realized the day of the election that he lost the election, but that's not. But that's
sure. But
not
I'm just asking. I'm saying that, at that point, say if not Giuliani, say if there are any other number of insane people that Trump could theoretically put on his side of the government that wouldn't tell him no next time, because there were a lot of people that rebuked him. There were Republicans in a lot of the states, right? Raffensperger is one of them. There were Republicans in his own administration. You've got Rosen. You've got Barr. There was his own vice president. But theoretically next time, and I feel like last time going in, I'm going to do a little bit of mind reading at macro, maybe agree, maybe disagree. I think that Trump kind of thought, one, I don't think Trump knows much at all about how the government works. I think we probably agree with that. So if somebody was running and they blatantly said, I don't want to use the fascist word, but if they said, I want to be an authoritarian, I'm going to abolish all elections, you would say, sure, he's saying that, but I don't think he can actually do it. So it's okay if he runs for president. You don't care at all as long as you feel like the guardrails.
I mean, I might prefer other candidates, but I think that also
when a person has already shown you who they are, and when every single person around him agrees with that, when every single person that's worked with him, save for Sidney Powell, Eastman, and Giuliani, which I don't think anybody would want to throw their lot in with those three. It just seems wild to me that we would say yeah, we're just going to go ahead and trust this guy with another term of president, but he can't run for a third term, so it's fine. When there's 50 million other things.
And I'll make you the case that if you want him not to make election trouble, you should elect him president in the next election cycle. And then he will be ineligible.
Okay. Well, I find that to be a wholly unconvincing argument, but okay.
Well,
stuff that recently, the policy that I get from Joe Biden on the other end of the filter is a bunch of bullshit I don't. So that's the basic calculation.
Okay. So then the idea is essentially that Donald Trump's rhetoric is insane, but we don't care. Donald Trump would probably try to steal an election if he could, but he probably won't be able to.
He's not going to do it again. I told you. He's not.
You don't think he has any? Why not? And he didn't. To say that Biden has failed at bipartisanship when we've gotten the CHIPS Act, we've gotten the IRA, we've gotten the ARP, we've gotten the bipartisan infrastructure bill, when we've gotten all this major legislation that is working in this historically divided Congress, as opposed to Trump that got us tax cuts and deficit spending. Just on the real quick thing, the reason why my main problem that I feel like we have today in society is people are getting into their own bubbles. The idea of having like conservative schools and liberal schools seems like the saddest thing in the world to me. Like I would want conservatives and liberals going to school together because I think these people need to interact with each other more, if for no other reason than to see that the other person is not like an actual monstrous, horrible entity that wants to destroy the country.
Ben, you've gotten a chance to talk to Destiny now. What do you like about the guy?
A lot of the same sorts of things, but it's really fun to see how you do your process. That is a cool thing. And it's a gift to the audience because honestly, doing what we do, so much of what we do is sitting and reading and being behind closed doors and educating yourself and talking with people. But getting to watch you do it in real time is a really cool window into how people think and how people learn. So that's a really neat thing.
Well.
The second thing is I think Biden has done a really good job at being able to actually bring different people in Congress together to pass legislation. I think that bipartisanship is really important right now, considering how divided we are. Biden was able to pass the IRA and the CHIPS Act, which both have like fostered a ton of new manufacturing that's been happening in the United States, which I think is really cool because we're finally building stuff again. And then I think that the foreign policy under Biden, I think that our aims right now are a lot more noble than they were. Is a lot more defensible than endless drone wars that we're trying to hide in Yemen, fighting in Syria, whatever other, the photo opportunities with North Korea, the back and forth with Iran, whatever kind of like mixed bag of undermining the United States Trump was involved in when it came to U.S. foreign policy under him. So those would be my three big ones. I think defensive institutions, ability to bipartisanly pass legislation, and then more noble foreign policy aims.
Seb, what's your case for Trump?
He loves America. He doesn't hate America. It's really that simple. And he understands the institutions are either broken or corrupt. And he's not a member of the political elite.
Biden, when Kushner is signing multi-billion-dollar deals with Saudi Arabia, when Kushner was working in...
Hold on, but that's whataboutism, right? That's not like Hunter Biden could be a bad guy and Jared Kushner could be doing whatever you say he's doing. Those are not...
Sure, I'm not. It's not a whataboutism because it's not a defense of Hunter. I think it's more remarking that it's interesting what conservatives that are fans of Trump are selectively skeptical of. That if Biden had created a position in the White House for his son Hunter to work under, and then he had sent his son to go and negotiate on behalf of the United States, and then afterwards his son was signing multi-billion-dollar deals for companies that he worked with, this is like Burisma, but 100 million times worse because it's in the official capacity as a government worker while being related to a president who didn't divest.
I guess all I'm saying, sorry to interject, I really want you to get the time. If Donald Trump had a son like Hunter Biden who was doing what Hunter Biden did, everyone on the left would be outraged too, right? So
you could play many people on the left talking about Kushner that much, considering how crazy those deals are.
I mean, people have talked about it less. It's true.
Sure. I think that when you talk about like wanting to fundamentally change this country, I don't think Biden wants to do that. I think Biden genuinely loves the United States. I look at somebody like Donald Trump who undermines basically every single part of this country, whether it's the legal and judicial system, whether it's trust in the voting process, whether it's NATO, whether it's U.S. Impressions or the U.S. reputation abroad. I think that Trump fundamentally has no respect for any part of this country. That's why he suggested suspending the Constitution so that he could look for voter fraud. It's why before getting elected, he said that people that burn the flag are one of our most important First Amendment protected rights, should have their citizenship stripped from them, which is insane.
But the immigration issue, the illegal immigration issue, seems to be much, much worse under President Biden. Would you agree with that?
Yes, we're facing unique issues right now, yeah.
So why would you want to re-elect a man who has allowed this many illegal immigrants in, despite the fact that I think it's fair to say the vast majority of Americans agree that this shouldn't be happening?
I think that when it comes to border stuff or immigration stuff, I think that most of the disagreement, I think for America, I think we generally agree on most things for what the immigration policy should look like. The problem is we have a very unique problem right now at the border relating to asylum seeking, and the federal government's hands are tied in terms of how you can deal with those people. So with the way that the law works right now, if you're an illegal immigrant and you come up to the border, you see that like the encounters have gone up dramatically. Well, so is the actual catch rate of people coming in. Like, not that many people are sneaking past the border guards. The reason why is because you don't have to actually sneak into the country anymore. You just have to show up between a port of entry, or maybe even at a port of entry now and go, hey, I'm here to seek asylum. And once you've done that, it's like a get out of jail free card, and they have to take you in, they have to process you because of how the federal laws on the books are right now. And then because we don't have enough judges to actually go through all the cases, you're given basically a slip. You're saying, hey, please show up for your trial, and then you basically release them into the country. Some people will try to say that like Biden does catch and release, or we have like a catch and release law. But we don't really. It's like a combination of pretty complicated things on the books for how we deal with asylum seekers. And the last huge bipartisan bill that died in the House was supposed to increase the amount of judges we have to work through asylum seekers. It was supposed to change the standards that we would use to evaluate people claiming asylum. And it would have increased funding basically for every part of the
Wouldn't
border
it be
security.
easy to just erect a physical barrier that prevents people from going into this country except at a port of entry?
No, it wouldn't do anything. This is the frustrating thing, because the issue is what I said. The issue, if you look at the vast majority of people that are coming in and you talk about things like catch and release, it's asylum seekers. These are laws on the books that have to change. And you say that like, well, other countries have borders and they don't have to deal with this. When the Syrian refugee crisis happened, I'm sure you remember, because I think it was probably a big motivating factor for Brexit, even if it was in the background. There were tons of refugees that were streaming into Europe, and there was a huge crisis. You saw a lot of right-wing parties gain popularity because of how unhappy people were. In Sweden, you've still got residual issues relating to those immigrants. You had the AfD rising in popularity in Germany. You had Marine Le Pen becoming popular again in France.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah. But the conservatives love to bring up the lowest unemployment for minorities under Trump and blah, blah, blah. We have the lowest unemployment for minorities right now under Biden. The idea that you would look at unemployment and use that as like a win for Trump, when unemployment under Biden has been the lowest that it has been in all of U.S. history, and it's after rebuilding an economy, not like soaring ahead of like historically low interest rates year after year after year, which kind of led into a lot of the issues that we experienced with inflation and having to tighten up interest rates and everything. The economy under Biden has done exceedingly well. It would be nice if we had a Democrat come into office that wasn't trying to clean up.
Were hysterical. We had to repurpose DOD funds and say the border is actually a national security issue if you've got terrorists coming across the border. We had to repurpose national security funds to build the border and buy the steel to build the wall. That took us over a year. What does Joe Biden do? He sold them for scrap iron. That's why it's deliberate, and that's why he's a human trafficker.
The talking points are funny. I think it's really funny. I think if you're listening to this in video form, I think you should rewind, because I think Seb accidentally gave away part of the plot. And you said that it allows 5,000 illegal immigrants to come in a day. Minimum? Wrong. That was the maximum cap.
No.
One of the issues that we faced, I did read it. Let me finish. I did read it. You should read it as well. One of the things that would have been nice is it would have actually placed a cap on the amount of people that were coming in and claiming asylum. That 5,000 per day would have said that once we hit this cap, we are not processing anybody else. You could have the most legitimate asylum claim in the world, and we would not allow you into this country, which was already about to be challenged by a ton of legal people around the United States. And I think there were international bodies as well, because whether or not you can cap asylum seekers is still an internationally debated topic, but that is what that legislation seeks to do. If you feel, again, so passionately some immigration legislation, why did Trump shut it down?
Because you have to have the other side acting in good faith.
You can say that, but you did. If you really truly believe that the other side is at fault, then it seems like you need a candidate besides Trump, because Trump wasn't able to get anything done when he was president. You just said it yourself that Trump had to repurpose DOD funds to do it. Trump had a larger margin in Congress. Trump had all three branches of government and accomplished less than Biden did when it came to legislation, when it came to the border, when it came to infrastructure, when it came to foreign policy, when it came to almost every single aspect of running this country. And Trump was the one that came in saying, I'm the business guy. I can bring people together. I can get these things done because I know how to get people to work together. And all I hear from people once Trump left office was, well, the deep state got me, and it was the other guys, and I couldn't do anything, and I had to take money from the DOD to do it, and I couldn't figure anything out, and blah, blah, blah. And now that he's out of office, supposedly running for America, despite the fact that what he's really running for is so that he can pardon himself from his crimes. And
all right, so we can go back and forth saying, I read this, I read that. look it up for yourselves. Everybody can do that, okay? I just want it to be common sense. Does anybody with a straight face have the capacity to say, yeah, the Democrats are strong on the border and immigration and Trump isn't? I mean, it beggars belief. It's risible. It's risible.
That's one of the weaker points Stephen made.
Right. When Trump was coming into office, because I am an ardent capitalist, the only redeeming quality I saw was, well, okay, he is a business guy, so at the very least, maybe he's got some comprehension in terms of how to get people with different opinions to actually work together. And he is the most divisive leader in like all of U.S. history, or at least in recent U.S. history. The idea that, even his former chief of staff was against him, like that's a point in favor of Trump. These are your people. You're nominated. How is it that every person that's worked with him, how is it that his former attorney generals, his chiefs of staff, his personal friends, his personal lawyers, when you have this many people around you that are saying to the rest of the world, don't trust this guy. This guy is no good. I don't work with him anymore. I don't trust this guy anymore. Like, at what point do you look at him and you're like, okay, well, maybe it's not actually the deep state, every single institution, all of the media, all of the world, all of academia, and all of the politicians against him. Maybe he's just kind of like a bad person who's not very good at getting his job done.
It's like you live in an alternate universe. I know you're on YouTube and that those are your qualifications. Despite the people who are subverting him because they represent the elite class.
What were those achievements again? Just
the strongest economy we've ever had, lowest unemployment.
No, like things he's done, not things that happened.
What do you mean? What's the difference?
So like if I stand outside and a tree grows, I wouldn't say that I grew the tree.
Oh yeah, you said he did nothing in regards to the economy.
Like, what
I'll give you the example. You said he did nothing with not his responsibility. When we came into the White House, the president had a modest goal.
When you look at what happened on October 7th, and then you look at Biden, you go, man, this must be Biden's fault. It's like, okay, well, didn't we just have a historic round of talks with countries in the Middle East? How is it that the Palestinians were excluded yet again from these talks, And the idea that Trump was some strong partner in the Middle East when in 2019, Iran literally was shooting drones and missiles over into Saudi Arabian refineries, and the United States stood by and did nothing. Or the idea that we're going to stand here and we're going to say, oh my God, in Afghanistan, we pulled out and we abandoned our people. One, that timetable was sent by Donald Trump. He had a round of talks called the Doha talks that happened. The pullout could have gone better. I think that there were people that should have had the opportunity to leave that country that worked with us, that should have come out, that didn't get that opportunity. But like compare that to say, because remember, this is done under a Trump timetable. What is Trump's excuse for abandoning the Kurds that we fought alongside in Syria to a Turkish onslaught? There was no excuse for that. There was no reason for that. But he did that with, I don't even know, because he said, well, I don't want to be in the Middle East anymore. And then he obscured all the information relating to Yemen drone strikes that we were helping Saudi Arabia with, as opposed to Biden, who said, we're no longer going to participate in the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen, which was, I think, an improvement. We asked the Iranian. When I look at any of these particular issues, and it's easy to kind of like paint a story if you just like name some things and you don't really dig into them. Like we talk about Iran, right? And we say, well, October 7th, Iran was bold enough to, do foreign proxy training for troops in Hamas. Okay, well, Iran physically, literally attacked Saudi Arabia under Donald Trump, and nothing happened. So why would we imagine that they wouldn't back Hamas as well? It's not like Trump destroyed.
Well, it's not about imagination. It didn't happen when.
Well, no, it did. That
Donald
attack
Trump
did happen. Iran attacked Saudi Arabia, and Trump didn't.
But
have
October
which is
7th,
bolder than
October 7th didn't happen.
Sure, but from an Iranian perspective, that attack was bolder than October 7th.
What about Ukraine, etc.?
When I look at Joe Biden's behavior for Ukraine, I feel like it was about as well as it could have been, in that we were able to gather a wide amount of support across Europe. We were able to energize our allies. We were able to add to our NATO roster. We were able to raise a lot of money and send stuff to Ukraine, while at the same time drawing like a very clear, like, listen, we're supporting them, but we're not going to have troops on the ground. We're not going to do no-fly zones. We're not going to do anything crazy. Nothing that's going to set us on some road that we can't turn back from to go to World War III, but we're going to support them as much as we can, basically. I wish the support would be a little bit stronger. I understand the hesitation, though, in that they don't want Ukraine to be able to strike into Russia because there's concerns about escalatory stuff there. Yeah. My mom came from Cuba, and my mom and dad were in the Air Force. When I grew up, my parents hated China and Russia, for understandable reasons. My mom flew on the Looking Glass mission, looking for basically nuclear missiles, doomsday, end of the world type stuff. And yeah, the fall of the Soviet Union, the Iron Curtain was a monumentous thing in the world. And it sounds like you have similar feelings about Russia, which I'm happy to hear. Does it bother you, or does it give you pause that so many fans under Donald Trump, that so many of the people that support him seem to be so either skeptical about supporting Ukraine or fallen in support of Russia because they see them as a stronger, better country that champions Christian values better.
I have come to the conclusion they're not numerous and they have nothing to do with my former boss. To intellect. For 4 years, the world was safe. And now we have a world on fire. But yeah, the guy who's in court today in Manhattan, it's his fault. It's laughable.
Keep in mind, when you say, like, I don't want to go into the weeds or get into a rabbit hole, it feels like it's because you know you're wrong if you actually get into the details of things. When you look at October 7th, what are things that Donald Trump did to signal how October 7th would have gone? Well, when Iran attacked Saudi Arabia, he did nothing. He showed strong support for Israel by moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and we signed the Abraham Accords, where we mediated them, which were bilateral negotiations between Israel and other Arab countries that didn't involve the Palestinians whatsoever. How do you not look at these three things and think, like, wow, I wonder if these are creating conditions that are relating to October 7th? Like, these are the types of things that lead to that type of violence.
This is actually disgusting. This is dishonorable.
It's a lot of adjectives. Where are the facts?
No, stop it for a moment.
Have a right to respond if you want to.
Yeah, there's no substantive analysis. I mean, it's a bunch of virtue signaling. It's a bunch of, how dare you? I saw the videos and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is Donald Trump was an idiot when it came to foreign policy. He didn't understand the intricacies of any of the situations that he nor his administration were involved in. And a lot of the stuff that he did during his presidency was kind of a build-up to the frustrations that would obviously come out on October 7th and that horrible terrorist attack. It's funny that you were even slightly prescient without realizing it by saying that, like, well, if we move the embassy, there's going to be World War III. Yeah, moving the embassy and showing that kind of support for Israel while they're continuing to kick people out of neighborhoods in East Jerusalem, while the rest of the Arab world is having this huge separation between what their people think, because a lot of Arabs aren't really happy with Israel, but the leadership is kind of like done with the conflict and they want to move on. But it's continuing. Why can't we see Trump's?
Will you just shut up for 2 minutes?
So hold on a second. First of all,
it's almost like a blood libel.
Oh my God!
Given that Biden is the incumbent, Stephen, do you want to start us off?
Yeah.
Why is he good?
I think that Biden is a good president because I think the
Trump administration, for the first time in our history, we were net exporters of energy. Think about what that does for the lifeblood.
I don't know what people get this. I don't know where they get this talking about from. I don't even know like what the. I don't know where this idea that we're not producing energy or not producing oil or whatever like comes from. Like our exports are at like all-time highs right now. Our production is at all-time highs right now. Like I just. Our imports are at all-time lows right now. Like I don't know. I don't even know what else to say. You're just objectively wrong. You're just. Are we drawing on the tablet? I'm erasing. They're destroying the country, which are all ridiculous claims. Donald Trump is not the guy to fix them because he already proved that he couldn't do it once.
I said this when I was in the White House. I said it after I left the White House. Donald Trump won the election despite the GOP, not thanks to the GOP. I mean, this is the oddity. I mean, this is what Americans forget, and I find it funny that I have to, remind.
He won despite the GOP, not thanks to the GOP. This fits into the, this is one of like the hypothetical things that I put up here that, it becomes incredibly difficult to break anyone out of a given constellation because there's always some underlying transcendental entity that can explain every single part of why the constellation is true. Even evidence that seems to be in opposition to any particular belief is reinterpreted through the transcendental entity and becomes evidence for that particular belief. So like the deep state is like this transcendental entity that explains every single possible thing. And if Donald Trump wins, it's because he defeated the deep state because of the support from the citizens. It was so good. If he loses, well, it's because the deep state defeated him. No matter what the outcome is, your particular entity is always capable of explaining exactly why it happened. Like no matter what, it makes no predictions and it explains everything and it never needs to be corrected for, right? Because if a thing doesn't make predictions, you never have to correct for it. Because why would you? It predicts everything and everything can be retroactively explained and subsumed by whatever your transcendental idea is. What are you writing during these debates? I'm just taking notes on what the person is saying and then I'm, so that I know what I want to respond to. Because when they say a bunch of things, I want to respond to everything that's being said on the...
The operations were continuing. Garbage. There were no military operations in Crimea, in Ukraine, or on the border.
Crimea was captured.
The whole thing is a military operation.
True. What do you mean there was no military operation? And the war in the Southeast raged on the entire time as well. What is stopping you from running away and pivoting like him there would probably look better if it works for him. Because that's not how I want to debate. That's not my audience. That's not how I try to attract. I don't want people following me because I have the right talking points. And I know some people do. You can't help that. But like, again, I'm trying to stress thought process, epistemic humility, like research ability, like desire to like read, curiosity for information, like not being locked in. Like these are the things that I stress. I don't want to just give talking points to sound good and then get fans that way. It's just not what I'm looking for.
Did by ISIS at Kabul.
What were the conditions based for that Afghanistan agreement? For the Doha agreement? What were the conditions that you feel like the Taliban name it?
All kinds of. Motherfucker, you said you were in the White House part of these negotiations. What do you mean? Bury me. I'm giving you the shovel. I'm standing in a hole that's already 2 feet deep, and I'm begging you to bury me. You said you worked on these. It's funny because Trump says, I ran on immigration because we had problems with the wall. That's not true. Even on Trump's own little stupid chart that he posts, Obama was posting better immigration numbers than he was. So Obama was doing better than Trump on immigration. Trump wants to say it's not fair to count the last year or two, of my administration because COVID messed everything up, but he sure does want to take credit for the lowered immigration numbers under COVID. And then you saw them start to spike back up, even though he allowed on his chart for when he was actually out of office. They were spiking up almost to all-time highs right before he left office. So clearly Donald Trump wasn't capable of managing anything at the border. And when Democrats, where is my immigration bill? Where's my border bill? Where's my wall from my 4 years of Donald Trump?
Well, Democrats blocked all of that.
The Republicans had the House and the Senate. You can't use that excuse.
They didn't have enough of a majority. And they need more when they have been the ones blocking it for the last 8 years.
Okay. Well, I mean, you just gave me every reason in the world never to vote for Trump on this issue because you just admitted that Donald Trump can't do it without a supermajority, I guess, in the House and the Senate, which he will never have. So I automatically know that no matter what, Donald Trump will never be able to get anything passed. And so then I have to look at Harris and I have to look at Biden. And when Biden and Harris were supporting this bill, they actually did have support in the House and the Senate. The only reason that it wasn't passed is because Donald Trump, the cancer rotting our country, came in from the outside and said, don't pass this bill. I need to be able to talk about Haitians eating dogs and whatever other nonsense I want to make up. Legislation. Joe Biden and all his senility was somehow able to pass the same infrastructure bill that Donald Trump said for 4 years he was going to get done. He didn't. Donald Trump couldn't even repeal and replace Obamacare, which is what a lot of Republicans literally voted him to do. Like the idea that Trump is a competent leader is anything to start under this 4-year time period. But if you look at what he was actually setting up in any of the countries where the conflict is going on, all he was doing was setting the stage to kick the can down the road for future conflict to erupt, which it has.
All right, Destiny, what would you give Trump credit for?
What domestically or internationally?
Anything. Give him some credit for something.
Let's see, if I had to give Trump credit for anything, I mean, our economy was strong under Trump. I do think sometimes that Democrats are too heavy-handed when it comes to things related to welfare or things related to taxation. I don't like the idea of demonizing success. I think that Republicans typically do a better job or did do a better job at things like patriotism or championing wealth or people that were making money. So I guess I would give Trump, general credit for things like that. I mean, I saved money on my taxes.
And Tommy, just to return the favor, can you think of something good to say about Joe Biden?
Money. So I guess I would give Trump, general credit for things like that. I mean, I saved money on my taxes.
And Tommy, just to return the favor, can you think of something good to say about Joe Biden?
In one of the most exploding economies in the history of the United States and the recovery from COVID and all, there's not in all of the foreign policy guidance we have related to Ukraine and Israel, there's not a single positive thing that we can say about Biden's presidency right now.
Well, no, here's what I would say to you. Again, it comes down to perception, Destiny, which is you're not wrong to say that the economy is in pretty good shape.
I definitely agree there's perception issues, but I mean, hey, listen, we're in the media. The goal is to fight the perceptions because I think the perceptions are crafted here. And thoughts on the weird Kamala takes on putting federal restrictions on price gouging? My understanding is the states have restrictions in mind. She's trying to broaden it to a federal level. I don't know. In general, I don't like price controls. I think they're dog shit. In the primary, Kamala ran as a pretty far left candidate. She was one of the further left candidates, I think. Oh, anyway, yeah, Kamala Harris is like her econ policy is probably be significantly to the left of what I would in an ideal world support. But the issue is that here's the issue though. The issue is that there is no conservative right to fight on economic policy anymore because people will say, like right now, conservatives are kind of fighting Kamala on price controls, but conservatives are fully on board with communist economic policy. They just don't realize it because they don't know how it's phrased. Because Donald Trump is a populist, and populists will always lean into highly protectionist policies for their economy. That we don't have an economically conservative right to fight with the economically whatever the fuck the left is. Kamala's policies are probably significantly left. I'm probably going to over the course of the next couple months, as things are unveiled, I'll probably disagree with a lot of Kamala's more left policies. I'm not as concerned about hardcore price controls, though, because I think those are DOA. I don't think those are passing anywhere. Or they're going to end up becoming so watered down that it'll be like, yeah, we've decided that if you raise the cost of food during a national disaster, like 1,000%, there's like a federal crime for this or whatever. Why do we think that the insurrection, the rebellion, needs a significant chance to succeed in order to be called an insurrection or rebellion? That's just historically. You keep saying historically. That's never been the case. It's never been the case that we've had to establish that. It would have never been the case, for instance, if only one state seceded and they had no realistic chance of winning in the Civil War, that we would say, oh, well, they weren't insurrectionists or rebellionists because they were never going to win. About how
if it's a joke, then if it's a joke, it should be treated.
And I just don't think the comparisons to other more extreme coups or more extreme rebellions or anything in Russia, it just doesn't make any sense. It's only done to equivocate on what's actually happened or to do a whataboutism to something that I would probably plainly agree with. Like, wouldn't you agree this is a more serious coup or more serious insurrection? Yeah, sure. There can be more serious coups and more serious insurrections. Much the same, there could be more brutal murders of one person and another. It doesn't make one
with them stripping Rudy Giuliani of his law license.
Rudy Giuliani should go to jail. He went in front of multiple state legislatures and he lied. He went in front of the country and he lied. He fed into one of the largest lies that's been told. 80% of Republicans, probably you included, still think that the 2020 election was a fraud because of lies that he helped perpetuate. And he admitted that in court. When he was finally sued on these things, he said, yeah, I lied, but it's my First Amendment right to lie.
I couldn't tell you a single thing about any of the stuff that Rudy Giuliani has said
but you have a strong opinion about him being disbarred.
They were protesting that they were going to certify the election results where
correct.
they...
To stop the steal. What does that mean? Are you familiar with, the elector plot?
The what?
Let's say that was true.
A dragon could have come and landed on the Capitol if we're just talking about, make-believe hypotheticals.
Well, every single thing I just said is, beyond verified true. No one even contests this.
People like Destiny. I watch that guy and he makes me just want to vomit because he sounds smart. He obviously has a raging drug problem. Okay, that guy is eating no food. He is eating lots of uppers, and he thinks he's smart because he talks a lot, and he's got his brain's going brrr.
Do you want to start? Go for it.
Yeah. Oh, no, I mean, we could just start with, I guess we could start with, what I said in the video.
So we don't have to dive into every single thing, but we'll do one particular thing, okay? So Rudy Giuliani, as part of Trump's whole election fraud thing, he made claims about ballot counting and video camera footage, in Georgia, right? Giuliani made very specific claims, especially revolving around a lady called Ruby Freeman. He was
ballot boxes or boxes of ballots under the tables. I saw the video.
Yeah. That came from him. Okay. So the video was heavily edited. All the claims about Ruby were false. She took him to civil court afterwards to sue him for defamation. He admitted in civil court that he lied, but it was his First Amendment right to, and he lost that case for $147 million. If he's an attorney representing somebody, you don't think this is grounds for disbarring someone?
I don't know whether or not first of all, I have no idea whether or not those the videos are real or not. That's the world I live in. Is someone can take Rudy Giuliani to court, say that he was, that he heavily edited these and so on and so forth. And I still don't feel like I have even a moderate handle on whether that's true or not. Because
so for those fake slights, that none of this is contested, right? This is all in open court. People have been, there's the fake slates have been filled out. All of that information is publicly viewable. That Trump's campaign, that Eastman Chesebro and people working for Trump Giuliani were trying to organize, or they successfully organized fake electors in 7 different states to get them sent to Congress. That was the whole point of January 6th to stop the steal, was to get Pence to choose the fake electors or to just reject all the votes because there's competing elector slates.
I know nothing about that story at all.
Okay, well, let's say theoretically, let's say that was true, and he wanted Pence to choose the fake elector slates, and then he also sent a huge riot down to the Capitol to try to encourage Pence to do the right thing. Does it seem more likely that violence might have been like a part of the strategy to pressure the politicians there into choosing the fake elector slates?
I mean, if we're talking about, I mean, a dragon could have come and landed on the Capitol. That's you hate him. Like, you guys hate him. And if you say you don't hate him, I disagree with you.
I mean, I think he's un-American, and I think he's a threat to the order of the United States. Like, I think he's historically bad for the country, and I think that he's bad for what this country represents. On January 6th, Donald Trump watched the Capitol burn for 3 hours, and he sat there and watched and did nothing until the very, very, very end. He finally sent a tweet telling people to go home. You don't think that was an abdication of his duty? You don't think he was watching his own vice president come under attack? You don't think that he...
this is what I'm saying. There's no point in us talking about January 6th at all. Like, just
because you're uncomfortable, because you know that the facts don't support you.
Oh, no, it's not because I'm uncomfortable.
Because Donald Trump is...
I'll say things, you'll go, that's not factually accurate. You'll say things, I'll be like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, but I can prove every single thing I say. There's like 50 million witnesses to every point that I say. All you have is fantasy on your end, right? You don't have any facts. Okay, what do you think is one thing? You're saying they don't agree with the results of the election because they think it was rigged, and they're going to go and protest it to, quote unquote, stop the steal.
Right. And so you're saying that this was a coordinated plan.
No one said anything about, well, it was coordinated because Donald Trump, they didn't go on January 5th, right? They didn't go on January 7th, right? They went there on January 6th to protest what you said.
People to protest, not to violently insurrect the government with no guns.
Well, he knew they had guns when he sent them to the Capitol because the vast majority of the people that showed up at the Ellipse were outside of the secured area. The Secret Service told him there were people there with guns. That's one of the reasons why he wasn't allowed to go to the Capitol afterwards, even though he wanted to. And then he sent them to the Capitol to go and protest. What were they protesting? The certification of the vote. And what happens when they went there? They managed to delay the certification of the vote. What did Donald Trump do? He was calling senators saying, hey, maybe we should wait a little while longer to certify the vote. Everything plays into this one narrative of trying to stop the certification of the vote, stop the steal. That's what it was. It's like so obvious. Like every single part plays into this.
It's such a crazy interpretation.
Literally everything from the beginning. Hey guys, we're going to stop the steal. Everybody shows up on the Ellipse at January 6th. Hey guys, just so you know, the election was stolen. You need to fight like hell or you're going to lose your country. This election was illegitimate. We need to hashtag stop the steal. People march to the Capitol, they protest and they riot, and they have to stop the certification of the vote, which was the steal. And you're like, and then Donald Trump is sitting in his office for 187 minutes for 3 hours, not calling the National Guard or doing anything, watching them stop the steal. And you're like, bro, how could you possibly have this interpretation of events? What?
Because you're making one gigantic leap that's not even defensible in any kind of reasonable way. None of that.
January 4th, Donald Trump tweets out, how can you certify an election when the numbers being certified are verifiably wrong? You will see the real numbers tonight during my speech, but especially on January 6th. Hashtag March for Trump. Hashtag Stop the Steal. Hashtag Do Not Certify.
What about that? How is that telling people to go violently raid the Capitol?
On January 1st, retweeting, the cavalry is coming, Mr. President. Hashtag March for Trump. Hashtag Stop the Steal. The slogan is be there, will be wild, January 6th. What are they doing?
He's promoting a protest.
For the certification of the vote.
Right.
January
1st. It's not there. It's just not there.
But it literally is. Donald Trump had fake elector slates made. He was trying to pressure Pence to accept these fake electors from these states, and violence was part of the way to pressure people in Congress to not certify the vote or to pressure Pence to...
Do you think, this is a little bit off topic, that your fact pattern and the things, support your conclusions in this conversation? I disagree. That's a nice piece back there. You're the shotgun. You shoot clay?
Yeah, skated trap, depending on what's near me. But
where do you live?
Miami Beach.
Oh, that is not what I would have guessed. I went to UFC 287 in Miami.
But the subverting the democratic process, fighting against like every single branch of government, saying you're going to be a dictator on day one. How do you feel when he says he has a right to suspend the Constitution to look for voter fraud?
I don't know about that. Let me ask you this: Do you think that it was a reasonable conclusion that his supporters had that there might have been widespread shenanigans in the swing states?
No,
given the
this was
circumstances?
fabricated, made by Donald Trump's campaign. And every single one of these major claims was a total and absolute lie. And you can follow the genesis of them all the way to the culmination. And it always ends with people like Giuliani or Powell or Fox News saying, we lied about this. That's why Fox News lost their Dominion lawsuit. That's why Giuliani and Sidney Powell said they lied and they settled with the states that they were fighting with. All of them did. Every single one. That's why he lost 62 out of 63 of his court cases.
I'm not talking about those guys. I'm saying.
Okay. All right, listen. If you want to chat at another point, we can. I have another show I have to do in like 10 minutes. So I need to run downstairs to my studio. But
all right, brother.
Yeah, if you ever want to argue about any particular topic. Also, listen, if you ever want to dive into any particular things, like you've got like a particular study, research, or like where we get into the weeds, I think, because that's where I specialize. Let me know. Shoot me a link and we can go over it. Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you, dude. This is fun.
Have a good one. I'll see you later. It
Bye.
relies on a very nebulous understanding of what like intimidation or plan to use violence, which stands in the face of every single criminal statute, every single legal charge, all of our jurisprudence around intimidation for violence and everything, all of that. That's my issue. If you want to go through my definition, I'm glad to, and we can torture the fuck out of it if you want, but mine are going to be based on historical court cases. It's going to be based on things that people said around the time. And when I say people, I mean lawmakers, I mean justices, I mean other members of like Congress and the judiciary. And it's going to be based on what the 14th Amendment was framed around when people thought things were an insurrection. And language about other insurrections happened. We can go through that right now if you want. Just to be clear, there is no comparison here between our two definitions. I'm only technically even the coup idea that Donald Trump was trying, that was illegal, right? It violated the Electoral Count Act. Like that was an illegal act that they were trying for.
I would have to I find it interesting, by the way. I've never delved into this. Okay, so let's start with the first one. The first one is, I think I have where you got this from, an assemblages of persons. Right? That's number one. Maybe I'm getting this from
an assemblage of people, I think, united for a common purpose. So like you put out a notice, like say, hey, everybody show up to DC on January 6th. We're going to go protest the election. People all there for a common purpose.
Okay, that seems fair. I don't think I have much to quibble about that.
You can have an assemblage of people united for a common purpose that isn't an insurrection, right? Like if you go to a Destiny fan meetup, that's an assemblage of people united for a common purpose, I think, right?
You could do, and let's just clear this up. You could do any one of these four things or a combination thereof. It must be all four to be an insurrection.
Correct.
So you could do 1, 2, and 3, but if it's not 4, it's not an insurrection.
Correct.
I think so. So number 2, acting to prevent the execution of one or more federal laws.
Okay.
Okay. Does it have to be federal law? Was your definition federal law?
For me right now, yes, that's what I'm comfortable arguing. It probably could carry over to states. I'm just not sure if you can insurrect against a state.
Well, that seems to be problematic. Why couldn't you insurrect against a state?
Can you commit treason against a state?
Well, I would assume, why not?
Okay. I'm not prepared to argue that against this. Okay, I don't know if that's possible. I'm not sure.
For example, let's just take a hypothetical like the Chaz zone, right? You don't have to agree that it was an insurrection or anything, but if they take land away from the state or city government, and that government is also part of the United States government, wouldn't that be insurrection against the federal government as well?
I don't know. I wouldn't be prepared. I would have to do more research. Because my definition, hold on, to be clear, because my definition is historically and legally founded, I can't expand beyond what I've researched this definition to encompass. So you could give me hypotheticals where I could imagine maybe it would be. However, it's possible that there are parts of the law or parts of state legal codes or something granted to the states by some amendment or the Constitution that make it so that you actually can't have an insurrection against a state. That's possible. I haven't done that research, yes.
For public purpose, that just means it's not for private. It'd be like challenging basically any law.
Mm-hmm.
Through the use of violence, force, or intimidation by numbers. Anything that meets those four criteria is an insurrection.
I would say so, yeah. Like somebody writing, oh, this was an insurrection, some kind of like legal figure, whatever. You can't provide a single example of that. Then when you turn to me and you go, well, can you provide a legal example? Yes. The Colorado Supreme Court engaged in an analysis of January 6th. They decided that it was an insurrection. New Mexico engaged in an analysis of January 6th, and they disbarred somebody from office because they decided it was an insurrection. In the Congress, there was an impeachment held of Donald Trump, and the House and the Senate both agreed that it was an insurrection. So in all the court cases, I've won. You're asking me the hyper-specific question of was an individual charged with the crime of insurrection? No, but I'm not sitting here arguing over the individual crime of insurrection. I'm arguing that it was an insurrection. Those are two fundamentally different things. That's why you failed your court threshold, and I've exceedingly won mine. It was the state Supreme Court.
You did not. The spurging out does nothing, right? The fact that Colorado, again, it's not that the Supreme Court upheld either the New Mexico.
The Supreme Court literally refused to hear the appeal on the New Mexico court case. So yes, they did uphold that essentially decision. Yes,
they did not. They did not say that they determined it was.
Am I crazy, or is this ruling not as big of a deal as everyone is saying? I've only glimpsed it, but we'll go through the entire ruling today. From the little bit I've gathered so far, initially, it seems like a really big deal of a ruling. And then when you look at it a little bit more and you think about it, it's probably not actually that big of a deal. But then when you look into it a bit deeper, I think it is maybe the beginning of the unraveling of our democracy. So, sufficient allegations support the indictment's charges without such conduct. Testimony or private records of the president or his advisors probing such conduct may not be admitted as evidence at trial. Oof, that's like a big... But once it is determined that the president acted within the scope of his exclusive authority, his discretion in exercising such authority cannot be subject to further judicial examination. The Constitution, for example, vests the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States in the president. So something that would be very interesting here, I don't know if they'll address it in here, is one of the examples that was given was, okay, well, the president of the United States exclusively has the power, and it is literally granted explicitly in the Constitution to grant pardons. What if the president accepts a bribe for the pardon, right? This is what the three-legged test was like. Why do you want to, how can you prosecute somebody for taking money? Well, because he gave him $1,000 and he wanted him to do something. Right? What do you mean gave him $1,000 and wanted him to do something? Well, he gave him $1,000 as a bribe to pardon somebody. Pardoning? Whoa! Sorry, sir. That's an official part of the president. I didn't even hear what you just said. I'm sorry. Excuse me? Like, how would you even prove that crime if you can't even talk about the core function of what the president's doing? It seems like...
I saw you were discussing Constitution. I thought maybe I dropped wanted.
Oh, I'm on page 20 of 120, so I'm just reading through the Supreme Court decision. A thing that could never be criminally prosecuted?
For the pardon itself, yes. For the bribe, no.
What am I bribing for if you can't review the pardon?
Yeah, the bribe itself, I think you could.
What is the bribe? What is
itself, no.
I can't review the president to see if he actually did the thing, though, or if he had any intention of doing the thing, though. Wouldn't the action just be taking money?
That's a fair point. So it might be the case that in that case, the bribe would be legal.
Even so, because I know that some people are probably going to come away from this thinking like, man, what is the outer perimeter of the president's duties? But I'm thinking like, man, permanent, like absolute criminal immunity, even from the core duties, is kind of weird. And the fact that you can't even consider motivations or anything. But maybe, I don't know, maybe they'll discuss it in here.
Almost certain no.
So what the court has said is there are 3 different types of actions that a president can take, okay? That the court invented these 3 categories of actions. One is, Roberts talks about a core power, okay? Which just means that it's an action that only the president can take, that he needs to take, okay, to do his job. These things are beyond criminal review, full stop, okay? That's just completely thrown out the window, all right? One is, okay, you've got core powers. Okay, these are things that are, Roberts calls these, I think, preclusive and exclusive, or preclusive and conclusive. Basically, these are the things that only the president can do that's been expressly delegated to the president. Of those core powers, all of those are beyond criminal review. Nobody can touch them, nobody can look at them, and you can't even use them as evidence towards other crimes. Go ahead.
I was going to say that.
Are you familiar at all with the whole Rosen, Donahue, Clark, Trump stuff?
I have no clue that
Attorney General and his Deputy Attorney General, so the 2 highest people in the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I think I actually have read about this.
Yeah, Donald Trump basically said, listen, I want you guys, and then he used another guy in the DOJ called Jeffrey Clark, I want you to send a letter to 7 states that's lying, saying
I've read about this. This is listed out in the
indictment, correct. And Donald Trump said that if you don't do this, I'm going to fire you, basically, kind of, more or less, right? Well, Roberts said that action in particular is beyond review. He declared that criminally immune. So
he says that laid out right there in the Supreme Court doc?
Correct. Explicitly, yes. He says that action is beyond review. I can read the quote for you if you'd like.
So you can't determine motive from that then?
Correct.
Yeah, can you pull up the quote just for the
Yeah, absolutely.
Exhibit? Right.
Okay, 2 more paragraphs, then we're done, okay. Investigative and prosecutorial decision-making is the special province of the executive branch, and the Constitution vests the entirety of the executive power in the president. For this reason, Trump's threatened removal of the acting attorney general likewise implicates conclusive and preclusive presidential authority. As we have explained,
the president's power to remove executive officers of the United States whom he has appointed, that's just like your head of all the department, your executive officers, okay, may not be regulated by Congress or reviewed by the courts. The president's management of the executive branch requires him to have unrestricted power to remove the most important of his subordinates, such as the attorney general, in their most important duties. And the president cannot be prosecuted for conduct within his exclusive constitutional authority. Trump is therefore absolutely immune from prosecution for the alleged conduct involving his discussions with Justice Department officials. Okay, did you get all of that so far?
Yeah. So
okay, now wait. Before, okay, I just want you to keep this in mind real quick, okay? Because a lot of people, so here's an argument, counter argument, and why it's so stupid. A lot of the arguments that have been given by a lot of people, including Justice Sotomayor in this, in her dissenting opinion, is people say, what if Donald Trump orders a hit, SEAL Team 6, to assassinate a political opponent? And the standard conservative response, Ben Shapiro and every other hack fuck Harvard loser lawyer who's defending Trump gives the same explanation. They say, well, excuse me, assassinating U.S. citizens for personal grudges, that's not a power, a core power of the president, so this example is foolish. However, as I've just read to you, okay, using the DOJ to launch sham investigations and then lie to states about it, that's also not a core function of the president. But because it implicates some of his core powers, like hiring and firing people in the DOJ or discussing investigations potentially with the DOJ, it's been ruled absolutely immune. That's why that assassination attempt.
In all circumstances.
And also what?
In all circumstances is what you're saying?
Yes. That's what Roberts has said. So this conversation is beyond review now, meaning that a court can never look at it, ever. No prosecutor. Was this in a Federalist paper? Or was this in a Supreme Court opinion? I remember that, it was in Gorsuch's writing, who's a phenomenal writer. Good for you, Gorsuch. I think it was when Gorsuch was writing on the opinion about... Gorsuch was writing about the concept of stare decisis, which means that typically the court respects past court decisions, okay? And it was Chevron, that's right. And as he went into the different bullet points about stare decisis, one of the things that he talks about is there are reasons why we look back at the collective wisdom of judges, and when we rely on that collective wisdom, that built-up knowledge, that wisdom over time. And it's funny because one of the points that he brings up about going back and looking to see if judges have ruled on things. Are there lots of decisions? Were they made by, people under a similar system of law? I don't remember about it. One of the points that he brought up, though, was like, were these decisions made in ordinary time? That was an important part, right? You wouldn't say, for instance, does the government have the right to beat the shit out of me for no reason and go, yeah, look, in this time period, they did it. And like the time period you're bringing up is like the literal apocalyptic war of hell. And it's like, okay, well, hold on. Are we going to go to these 2 years and we're going to cite this as behavior that should be, seen as like like good judgments in ordinary time? Clearly not, right? These were exceptional circumstances. I really wish I could argue with an educated legal person who could tell me why I'm wrong. I don't just think it was a decision that I disagree with. Like, I think I just disagree that, like, I would say I disagree with the Chevron decision, but I feel like the Chevron decision, well, I disagree with Roberts writing on that. I just think Roberts is retarded. Gorsuch seems smart, and Barrett seems smart. But like overall, because of Gorsuch's add-on to the Chevron case, I would say Chevron decided fairly. But I could see reasonable minds disagreeing on Chevron. That's what I should say. I can see reasonable minds having different agreements or disagreements on the Chevron case. But the immunity case, the Roberts writing on that just seemed Finkelsteinian. It just seemed horrible and delusional and crazy. And the constant reliance to Fitzgerald about civil cases is just unbelievable to me. The reason why I don't like his citation of the Fitzgerald case is because he basically looks at a case where the president of the United States, Nixon, he did some action or something that resulted in the firing of an FAA person. I don't know if it was an AT-CT controller or what. The guy's like, well, fuck this. I'm going to sue the president. Fuck you. I lost my job. I'm suing you. And I think the court, I'd have to go back and see what the test was or exactly. But they were basically like, we can't just have people suing the fucking president all the time, okay? Because they're unhappy with an action that he did that like harmed them. We can't do this. This obviously isn't going to work. And I think that's a super fair rationalization, right? The president being civilly liable to be sued by anybody who might be harmed by an executive decision, yeah, that's stupid, right? But for Roberts to look at that and go, well, if the president can't be sued in civil court, well, clearly he can't be taken to criminal court. And that's it? I'm like, what? Well, hold on. Yeah, and then the fact that in the Fitzgerald case, they literally say, like, obviously crimes are different than civil shit. Okay, don't care. I don't care. I don't care. What am I even doing? Oh, I'm gonna go put my teeth in, okay? My dentures.
I think I grew up like very argumentative. My mom is from Cuba, so my family was like very conservative. And then I grew up like listening to the news all day, listening to my mom's political opinions all day. And then I argued with kids in high school and everything. And I've always been kind of like an argumentative, type A, aggressive personality. So I think that probably lent itself well to the political stuff in 2016. Yeah.
Was that useful in gaming? That personality?
In some ways, yeah. In some ways, no. I don't know directly for the games itself. I don't know how much it necessarily mattered. But for all the peripheral stuff, in some ways it was really beneficial. I could kind of like cut out my own path and I could be very unique and I could kind of be on my own. In some ways it was very detrimental. I can be very difficult to get along with. And I'm very much kind of like, I want to do this thing. And if you try to tell me what to do, I don't want to have like a sponsor or a team or anybody kind of with a leash on me. So yeah, I guess it worked out.
It's interesting because the temperamental proclivity that you're describing, that's associated with low agreeableness. And generally, well, and that's more combative, it's more stubborn, it's more implacable, it's more competitive. And so you said that initially you were more conservative leaning, but that changed. What did it mean that you were more conservative leaning, and how and why did that change?
When I said I was conservative leaning, I mean I was writing articles for my school newspaper defending George Bush in the Iraq War. I was like very much like I think it's like an insult now when people say like neocon, but I was like very much like a conservative, a Bush era conservative. So supported big business, supported traditional, all of the conservative, I guess, like foreign policy, hawkish foreign policy, for whatever that meant as like a 14, 15-year-old.
Right.
There was the whole Elian Gonzalez incident that was very big for Cuban Americans, where there was a Cuban boy that tried to come to the United States with several other people and his mother, and their raft, I guess, crashed or something happened. I think his mom died and some other people died, and there was a huge debate on whether or not to send him back to Cuba, and Clinton ended up sending him back to Cuba. And I know that my mom was super irritated and all that, to say the least. And then once I hit college, I think I supported Ron Paul in 2008. My life kind of took like a wacky path. And then as I started working, I kind of had to drop out of school. I was working, and then I got into streaming. And once I started streaming, I had a son, basically around the first year I started streaming. As I started to go through life, and I went from kind of being in this like working poor position to making a lot of money, especially through the lens of my child, I saw how different life was when I had more money versus less. And I guess like
of the gigantic enterprises that can engage in regulatory capture, and that just vanished.
Is it not possible that maybe people looked and they said, hey, if all the governments, all the institutions, all the schools, all the private companies across all the countries around the world are saying the same thing, maybe it is the case that this vaccine just helps. Is that not possible?
Oh, sure. Of course it's possible, but that didn't mean it was right.
Well,
they used force. They used force.
We use force for all sorts of things in terms of public health.
We don't generally use force to invade people's bodies.
How long have vaccine mandates been a thing in Canada, the United States, and the entire world?
I don't think they should have been a thing.
That's great if you don't think they should have been, but when you say we don't generally use force, we absolutely use force. We've enforced vaccines for a long time. It's an important part of public health.
Fair enough. We did it on a scale and at a rate during the COVID pandemic, so-called pandemic, that was unparalleled. And the consequence of that was that we injected billions of people with an experimental, and it wasn't a bloody vaccine.
Of course it
wasn't.
Yes, it was.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
It's not.
What, isn't it a 100% success rate? You think it's a definition of vaccine? The whole point of the vaccine is to give your body a protein to train on so that your immune system works in the future. Who cares if it's not the same? There's different types of...
They used the word vaccine so that they didn't have to contend with the fact that it wasn't the same technology.
There are different types of vaccines that are different technology.
And it's bad in principle to inject billions of people with an untested new technology.
Isn't it also bad in principle for billions of people to get infected with a worldwide pandemic that initially was causing a decent number of deaths, a ton of complications, shutting down world economies?
Maybe it was. Maybe it was.
So shouldn't we be able to engage in that analysis and figure out, like, if we look at the
we're not engaging in the analysis.
No, because now we're talking about whether or not vaccines are even vaccines or not instead.
No, don't play that game. That is not what I was doing.
This is the most administered vaccine of the or inoculation or whatever you prefer to call it, in the history of all of mankind. Every single organization around the world is motivated to call this out if it was a bad thing. You don't think Russia or China would be screaming if Donald Trump or the United States warp sped through a vaccine that was having deleterious effects on populations all around the world? You don't think there wouldn't be some academic institution? You didn't think there'd be more than a handful of doctors and Joe Rogan and some conservatives saying this vaccine might have been bad if it was the case that American companies working with companies in Europe and Germany especially, right, because that's where BioNTech is from, in order to create or manufacture a vaccine that was causing excess deaths all around the world? There are so many different people that we motivated to call this out. How do you explain the fact that no, it's a handful of people? Where are the governments calling it out? Where are the academic institutions calling it out? Where are the other private companies calling it out? Wouldn't you stand to make a killing if you were a private company in Europe and you could say, look, the mRNA vaccines for sure are causing all of these issues? Why wouldn't Putin, why wouldn't Xi Jinping, why wouldn't anybody else in the world call this out if it was as horrible as it was?
There are plenty of people attempting to call
Nobody credible and no huge institution.
What do you make of the excess deaths? You haven't come up with a bloody hypothesis.
I don't even know if there are 20% at the excess deaths in Europe right now. If I had to guess off the top of my head, it's going to be, like you said, one might be lingering effects of an overwhelmed healthcare system. Another one might be deaths related to the war in Ukraine. Another one might be rising energy costs that have happened for a couple of reasons.
But it's absolutely impossible that any of it could be unintended consequences of a novel technology injected into billions of people.
I think that if excess, first of all, there aren't billions of people in Europe. So if there were excess deaths, I understand, but you're talking about excess deaths in Europe. I'm not aware of excess deaths that exist in other places that are completely and totally unaccounted for, where the only explanation could be the vaccine. I think if there were, I think more people would be talking about it.
Well, we have to.
And at one point, I remember saying, let me walk you through, Jeff, what you want to do. And I cross-examined him in front of the president as to what his strategy was. And when he finished discussing what he planned on doing, I said, fucking asshole, congratulations. You just admitted your first step or act that you would take as Attorney General would be committing a felony and violating Rule 68. You're clearly the right candidate for the job. And he was, and it was clear. I mean, everybody was on his case. The guy had never been before a grand jury, let alone having any idea how a criminal case would be prosecuted. And the people at DOJ people had said that they would quit if he got the role. And it went on for a while. And Jeff would keep coming back and he'd keep trying to get the president to consider it. And the president at the end, he kept on saying, listening to Jeff. And then the second Jeff would call what he was describing, that if you understood how a criminal division worked and grand jury processes worked and search warrants, it was completely ridiculous. What was he proposing that he would do if he became acting attorney general? It was seizing machining, confiscating voting machines, and he didn't explain how he was going to do that. The brain room is going through this now. Janine dictated it to Tim. It's rife with conspiracy theories and bullshit, and is yet another example of why this woman should never be on live television. This is completely crazy. Connor, can you please pull the full segment? Also, do not think Tucker pushed back on the fraud claims, but we'll rewatch. He didn't, just rapped. Thank you. Bro, it was actual malice in so many different teams. Oh my God. Reckless maniac. Respecting this audience, whether we agree or not, is critical. Fox has spent the month spitting on them. Right, our best minutes from last week were on the voting irregularities. Wait, I don't know if this is... Oh no, I think this is serious. They have to focus on the voting. That's true. Yeah, okay. No, he's being serious. Laura is not touching the Dominion story because it started on 8chan. By doing things which he thought would be popular with the Trump core. Like what? Like supporting Trump. Like airing baseless charges of election fraud? Yes. This is unhinged. This is insane. These are the people that we have to pretend are serious people. These are serious people, okay? All of these people are very serious and are here to tell you how the Democrats are destroying the country, okay? And you have to take them seriously. You have to treat them with the same level of seriousness.
executive action, or we look to the Supreme Court for everything. All of our civil rights, all of our big civil right legislation, where is that? It doesn't exist. It's come from the Supreme Court. Gay marriage came from the Supreme Court. Roe v. Wade, Casey came from the Supreme Court. And what happens to things that come from the Supreme Court? The next Supreme Court can take them away. What happens to things that come from executive action? The next executive action or the next Supreme Court can take them away. And I think that this hyperfixation on, no, screw bipartisanship, we're just going to fight with our end of the political spectrum. Our end of the political spectrum. Like even our own system, like reading, I think I've only read on stream, 7 or 8 Federalist Papers. Even just reading those gave me so much insight and understanding into why the branches are structured like they are. And there's a whole plethora. It's such good writing too. And these are so good. We will ask me, does somebody else have a better system? Maybe they do, but I would really want to understand why the arguments were made for this system before saying, well, we should do something completely different, My God, these are written, they're so good. These are so good. The arguments, like you understand that like our government is so not random. Like the way that they designed all of the different branches and how things are supposed to be done, it makes so much sense. It's what a great country. Our country is so fucking awesome, okay? We started with a baller revolution by a group of brave people, came to a new world. Those are the two
What sparked that interest?
The more that I think about it, the more I really do think today that I think the world still lives in the shadows of World War II. So I think it would be really good to understand World War II. And I feel like to understand that, I probably need to understand World War I. So I also, people still like map a lot of current stuff onto World War II. And I get very irritated, like when I see lefties say shit like, oh, like liberalism leads to fascism. And the only way we can stop, and like I see shit like that. It's like, this is all like such a stupid retelling of everything that happened in Nazi Germany. But yeah, so it'd be good to just have a comprehensive understanding of it all, I think. And then you never move the conversation meaningfully forward. Like people will say like, oh my God, like if the government is going to subsidize or if the government is going to publicly provide some services, it needs to be essentials. Things like housing, things like food and clothing. Like if the government's going to provide anything, it should be these things. No, the free market solves for things like food and clothing really well. There are tons of food producers. There's tons of food suppliers. Like transport is good. Like that's a really well solved problem by the free market. What the government should be providing are things that the free market can't provide well for. And those aren't always like essential things. Sometimes it's not even crazy essential stuff. Like I would say like internet, but nowadays the internet is pretty essential. I think it might even be like the UN Charter is like guaranteed rights or some bullshit. Am I making that up? It wouldn't be in the charter. That was stupid. Oh wait, is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is this part of the charter? International document by the UN General Assembly that enshrines the rights and freedoms of all human beings. Wait, is this part of the charter? I think it is, right?
Well, the Hillary stuff is that she had a private server, and when it got subpoenaed, she acid washed it as opposed to turn it in. Hillary Clinton is the scariest person ever. That is literally the last enemy I have respect for her. She's probably one of the most powerful women to ever live, but she is a vindictive, incredibly powerful person that I even get nervous talking about her too much on the internet. But she had a private server where who knows what's on it. I don't like to speculate, but she acid washed it as opposed to turn it in to the people who are trying to investigate her. It's pretty gangster that she could do that and not face any consequences. But the hacked emails, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like they'd be pretty stupid to be talking about any kind of like nefarious criminal stuff through a server that's shared by her entire campaign.
Okay, well, I'm not even sure what to say. I think it's incredibly sad that I feel like half the country, you included, has just been completely wiped away by the Trump brainwashing stuff. You're just factually completely ungrounded. You're off in outer space right now in terms of like the things that you believe.
We can go through any individual particular case if you want. I could talk to you about the entire Hillary thing from start to finish. I can talk to you about how there are standard procedures to wipe servers, including the destruction of devices. I can talk to you about how you don't even care about the fact that she had a private email server, because I bet that you've never talked about the fact that Donald Trump and his people were using private phones and emails, but Republicans never care when it happened. I mean, we can go through any one of these things in detail if you want, and I promise you will be wrong on every single thing, but it's up to you what you have the patience for.
I get this is.
But do you think that any indictments
really
came from the Mueller investigation?
Like I said, the indictments that came, were any of them because of Russian meddling?
Yes.
That there was actual direct Russian.
Yes.
Who was indicted for Russian meddling?
There were 12 indictments made for Russian nationals that ran a company in the United States called the Internet Research Agency that came from the Mueller investigations.
And the Mueller investigation concluded that they didn't really have much of an influence.
No,
Nothing
that's
in the
not
Mueller
true.
investigation
That's not true at all.
said that there was any real true influence in our elections.
I'm writing out how all of these little on how these mind things come together. And then I think the next thing I write out is like, okay, well, how do you be aware of these things, or how do you counter them? I think in yourself and then in other people. For many of the social and political beliefs we hold and value today, being factually correct offers little to no reward. Whether or not you know the factual details about a particular shooting, war, catastrophe, or medicine is very rarely relevant, since that belief is not factually tested on a day-to-day basis. Let's analyze a controversial event, the Rittenhouse trial concerning the 2020 shootings in Kenosha, Illinois, and think about the social incentives on both sides, assuming you're a part of a social structure that is pro-BLM. On some of these I do liberal, and some of these I do conservative. So the rewards for having factually accurate beliefs, let's say that it was only a 15-mile drive when you say across the lives. There's no reward for pointing that out. Punishment. I think people have this really bad notion that if you want the truth to rise to the top, you just need more speech. Freedom of speech is great. We just need more speech and more speech and more speech. And that's just not true. It's not true anywhere. And the noise and the mess of what exists right now on the internet, especially in places like X, where people can lie with impunity, including the owner, who is now shamelessly in full support of Donald Trump, who probably lies more than any politician person I've ever seen in my entire life. And this is in the same universe where Santos exists. It's absolutely insane. And I think people, I don't know what the conversation could even begin to look like, because when I say, misinformation is a huge problem online, conservatives and Democrats will both cheer and applaud for exactly the opposite reason. So there's something that we're going to have to do to approach and change how we sort through what exists online, what's allowed to exist online, or how people are allowed to propagate information online, because the current environment is never going to produce something good for democracy, I don't think. I've been allowed to... Why the fuck is it that we all forget about COVID and COVID happening when we talk about inflation? What the fuck? I feel like sometimes we're on the ship of the Titanic trying to figure out why the boat is sinking, but we're not allowed to talk about the fucking iceberg. How are Democrats to blame for inflation? Why does COVID fucking disappear whenever inflation comes up? The entire the question should be, are Kamala's policies causing inflation in the United States? Are Biden's policies? It should be, I don't know. Did they cause them in the UK and France and Italy and Japan and the rest of the entire fucking world as well? Is Biden's policy so destructive that it managed to cause inflation in worse places or in a worse manner across the entire world? It's so crazy. Stuff, and I think that there's a human tendency to nostalgize. There's a verb there I'm looking for. You hold the past with higher regard than it actually was, and now I've hit the age where people say things, and I'm like, excuse me. I saw a girl on TikTok several months ago, and she was like, rent is unaffordable. Nobody knows how hard it is for us kids anymore. 20 years ago, you could work a minimum wage job and have your own 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm like, excuse me, 18 years ago, I worked at McDonald's. I got $5.15 an hour. You better believe I had roommates, okay? It was a girlfriend, but there's no way you could afford. But people think, if you ask somebody, do you think that people owned more homes on average, in the 1900s, 1920s, 1930s, 40s, 50s? People are like, yeah, for sure. No, they didn't. Homeownership rates are about as they always have been from generation to generation. They're more or less on track to be the same, but it doesn't feel that way. As for why, there's 20 other examples that I could go into, but I would say that the biggest thing that has made a huge impact on our lives that nobody wants to talk about because it's not sexy and you can't really ideologically load it is the internet. It's changed in an unbelievably short amount of time, right? But even worse than that, again, going back to this internet thing, not only do I have ways to put off consequences, because I can filter my world so selectively, I might be able to avoid consequences entirely. Filtering is not good when you're doing it to an aggressive amount. Crazier and crazier and crazier. But because we have a way to navigate the world and not see the impacts immediately of these crazy things we believe, we're allowed to be crazy and not realize it for longer periods of time. There was given us the ability to do that in a really, really, really negative way. Like an example I always give is that like if one guy, grew up in the 70s and he really wanted to fuck a toaster, he's not going to be able to find anybody on the block to give him advice on that. He's probably not going to grow up fucking toasters because he's going to try it once and electrocute himself, or he's just not going to do it. But today, you could probably find a forum full of toaster fuckers that will give you like the best, 27-step guide to have the best sexual experience imaginable, okay, with the best toaster built for it. This type of filtering is not good. To go back to the thesis of like these 2 points, so I can believe a crazy thing, and there is no immediate corrective thing for it, right? Maybe I do think that a vaccine is like 50% lethal. I mean, how am I going to test that? It's not like I don't get any, and my friends don't get any. And then 2, now I can go online and I can see any documentary or any social media figure, whatever, and I can have reinforcement for that particular belief. These are 2 very, very, very bad, poisonous things for human minds because of an underlying factor, which is people are so horrendously mistaken, and they do not understand that like logic and syllogisms, like propositional logic philosophy, this is a very queer, unhuman thing. We have the capability for rational thought, but that's a skill that has to be developed in practice. You're not born with that. Evolution doesn't give you that. Evolution doesn't create somebody with the purpose of making them discern truth as well as possible. It creates something that can survive long enough to pass on your genes and take care of your kin. That's it. That's it. There's no reason for you to assume that your brain is uniquely equipped to be this logic machine. It's not. We're not computers. It's one of the reasons why this is a whole other thing. We don't have to get into this, but like one of the things that drives me the craziest about all these red pill losers is every single time, if somebody gives you an uncomfortable truth, if somebody's going to give you, here's an easy way to tell if you're bullshitting yourself. If somebody gives you an uncomfortable truth, and every single time you walk away with that uncomfortable truth, feeling like amazingly empowered and hyped and ready to go, you're not getting an uncomfortable truth. They're giving you a fucking hype speech disguised with bullshit, okay? If somebody's giving you this uncomfortable truth and they're saying something, like, listen, at the end of the day, you're the only one that can take care of yourself. It's all about you. Nobody's going to take care of you. And you're like, yeah, fuck yeah, that's awesome, right? That's not an uncomfortable truth. You're getting a pep speech, right? If somebody's giving you an uncomfortable truth, you should walk away, in my opinion, feeling pretty shitty about it, right? If somebody comes up to you and they're like, listen, you know what? You're 32 years old. You haven't talked to your parents in 5 years. Grow the fuck up and call them. Call them, because when your parents are gone, they're gone forever. Call them, right? And you should be like, fuck. Yeah, maybe. That should be your feeling afterwards. But people dress up stuff so much. There's a whole other thing of like that. Like people have taken on the aesthetic of all these things instead of like the thing itself. Being in evolutionary biology, I think we refer to this concept as, you've ever heard of tit for tat?
Yeah.
In a tit for tat system, tat is not evil, it's essential. You have to make sure that there are corrective mechanisms for tit behavior, that if somebody does a wrong, there has to be a tat to correct the behavior and to discourage the behavior. And this is something that has taken me a great deal of time to figure out, and I'm still working on it. And we talked a little bit personally before this about an issue that I have, like being mean to people, is short at that point. I can't get out of my community very much because people just see me as being incredibly aggressive. And they're like, okay, I want to talk to this guy. Like, this guy's like way too, he's way too mean and debatey or whatever. I think before I had very long legs, but very short arms. And that I hate that comment that you just made. It actually has been eating away at my brain for months. And I've complained about this on stream. This has been building for probably for the entire year. If you go and you look at the debates that I've done with Candace Owens, with Jordan Peterson, with Ben Shapiro, the comments under all these videos are the exact same. Wow, what a nice debate. It's so nice that these people have spoken to each other. Wow, cool that we can come together and talk. Wow, what a nice debate. I hate that, because nobody's actually considering any of the things being said. They're just happy that two people can sit in a room and talk to each other. However, for me to do this requires me to blunt my perception of the world so much, and to blunt my... The issue is that I feel like we've done this for years where it's just liberals apologizing over and over and over again. And I don't think conservatives have taken responsibility for a single horrible thing that they've done over the past 8 years in this country. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. And I start thinking, and I'm seeing all this crazy talk about how the liberals were the one, saying they called him a Nazi, they called him Hitler, what'd you expect? And then I start thinking, and I'm like, have conservatives ever said, hey, we need to dial it down after January 6th? Hey, we need to dial it down after, after like these, this leaked conversation from Trump, like, hey, we need to dial it down after, like the Dominion and the Putin and the voting stuff, or we need to dial it down after the Never. Not a single fucking time, not even one time has there been there have been some Republicans that have done it, and they are immediately excised from the party, and they're never Trumpers, and they're gone forever. Their political careers are over. So I think
And guess what? I love you. I love you. I love you.